Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast today. I've got a fantastic guest coming out of Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. Roz from Debt Free Degree. And she's got a really interesting story around financial literacy for young adults. She's also got a grit blueprint, which we'll talk about. And today's talk is going to be all about finances, financial independence, financial freedom. And I'm really happy to welcome her to the show. Dr. Roz, welcome.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I am so delighted to be here. I have so enjoyed your show. I think you have fascinating folks on and great topics. And when I found out that I was also chosen to be a guest, I was beside myself. So thank you, Chris, for having me. Like this whole time I kept saying Dr. Lou. And so you've said I can call you Chris. So I don't want your audience to think I'm being disrespectful.
I really enjoy having accomplished guests such as yourself. Briefly introduce yourself and we'll dive into the meat of the conversation.
Yes. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and listening. I am passionate about helping students learn to love themselves enough to graduate fully debt-free from college. When people ask me, what does love have to do with it? I talk to them about how Nonviolence 365 is truly the philosophy and methodology of my life. There are only 14 certified trainers of nonviolence in the world from the Martin Luther King Center. Their youngest child is Dr. Bernice King, and she's the CEO. So I'm deeply grounded and rooted in this philosophy of nonviolence, which is a love-centered way of thinking and speaking, acting and engaging. And so what would it look like if whole schools, if whole communities, if students are graduating and they don't have student loan debt? What does that mean for the economy? What does that mean for their ability to give back to other institutions, to buy homes more quickly, to invest in their community? And so it really is about not only the individual graduating debt-free, but it's that personal wealth, the generational wealth, and then that communal idea, that beloved community that we want to cultivate.
Yeah, really powerful. And so we'll dive right into it. And so one thing is, what inspired you to start the debt-free degree movement, and how has your journey helped students graduate without student loan debt?
I was from the time I was born, practically, my parents, I was born in the very last millennium, and my parents said to me, you will go get a 4-year degree. You will probably get advanced degrees because that's our expectation, and you will not go into debt for your degree. So I knew this from a very early age, and I just assumed that everybody was brought up that way, not necessarily that you must get a 4-year degree. And I actually don't subscribe to that aspect for myself right now. I believe that everybody needs some type of education post a high school diploma, but I am not one of those people that says everybody needs a 4-year degree. Absolutely not. However, I am one that says everybody should do it debt-free, and it's possible and available. So it was probably in 2005, I was working in higher ed, and I started hearing students talk about, I'm taking the maximum amount of loans, which at that time, Chris, if your tuition and fees were this much, but your loan amount could be up above that, and then you could take the maximum amount. So some students were using it for beneficial ways. Some students were using it to buy a hoop-de-doo car or to go to all the parties or whatever. And I was like, you have to pay this money back. And they weren't really understanding that was the expectation. And they were graduating at that time, $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 in debt. And that's when I started my movement of let's educate folks on how they can best graduate debt-free.
Yeah. Yeah, what's quite interesting because the mantra is just get into student loan debts, and we're all seeing the effects of the utility of a higher education degree. It's good for if you want to go into professions like law, medicine, these types of things. So you talk about the grit blueprint. So what is the grit blueprint, and how can students use it to strategically plan for a debt-free college education?
I love this question. So thank you so very much. The grit blueprint is the actual blueprint that every single student has used to graduate fully debt-free. It is something that I've used myself. So I have 3 degrees, including my PhD, and I only took $1,000 in loans. So I can map any degree fully debt-free, and it is using this blueprint. So the G is grants and scholarships. There is 46 billion with a B, $46 billion in grants and scholarships out there. The R is return on investment. So looking at what is this degree? How much is it going to cost you in time and talent? And how quickly are you going to recoup that money? The I is the I in every one of my programs. It's interconnection. And it's all about working smarter, not harder. And then the T is my proven triangle approach. So if you think about a three-legged stool, you have one leg is SM, that's student money. What is the student input? What is their money going to look like towards a debt-free degree? We have FM, which are your friends, your family, your folks, the people you're familiar with. It's what is their input. And then OPM is our favorite. And what do you think OPM stands for, Chris?
Other people's money.
Other people's money, exactly. And so it's a combination of that. And as I always tell my students, all money is OPM. All money is OPM.
Yeah, interesting. I love that. Next thing is this student loan debt crisis. And like I said, how do you see student loan debt affecting current generations, mental health, career choices, financial futures? What systemic changes do you believe are necessary to address this issue?
So one of my goals, Chris, is to work myself right out of a job. Okay? On my book and access to the Debt-Free Degree Club curriculum, I want every single student to have access to it. So right now, there are 30 million students in middle school and high school in the United States. And so if everybody had access to the Debt-Free Degree Club curriculum, access to the book that says we will say no to student loans, again, it goes back to not only how does that impact them personally, because the minute they walk off the stage, if they owe student loan debt, their choices are diminished because they can't say, oh, I owe student loan debt, so let me go try to build my own business. I was in higher ed almost 40 years. And then I became an entrepreneur. I can tell you how difficult it is to go from an employee mindset to an entrepreneur mindset to a CEO mindset. And those are three different levels of mindset. If you walk across the stage and you already know that you owe $500, $600, $700 a month in student loans, you don't have the wherewithal or the freedom and the latitude to start your own business. Whereas if you graduate debt-free, all of that changes. Everything, all of your choices, all of that just opens up. And again, because we recently had a horrendous natural disaster in our nation. And we know people who are impacted. And just because Elizabeth got to sit in her house and the power never went off does not mean that my heart isn't broken for my brothers and sisters that are in this area that is flooded and devastated and decimated. And we're all interconnected. So understanding that when Chris walks across the stage completely debt-free, then he's impacting everybody else around him. So that's my vision and goal, is that that every single student has access to the Debt-Free Degree Club. You know what? Honestly, Chris, my goal up until a couple of weeks ago was to have a Debt-Free Degree Club at every middle school and high school in the nation. And our public schools are exceptionally difficult to get a new idea into them, number one. And number two, the horrendousness that we put on public school teachers, and they just say, I can't do one more thing. So you would think that teachers would be all about this, and that is not who is excited about this. It's parents, it's financial advisors, it's folks who understand that ROI piece.
Yeah, we have a student loan debt crisis, and I think Biden, they tried to forgive all it's like, and there's a lot of people are questioning the value of the public school system and whether or not a college is necessary. Why do you believe financial literacy is crucial for students and families navigating the cost of higher education, and how can schools better integrate it into their curricula?
I wish they would better integrate it. One of the things about a debt-free degree, just like anything else, is it's not magic and it's not going to happen overnight. As I mentioned to y'all, I've been out of high school many decades. And so if I say, oh, you know what? I have my 40th high school class reunion next week. I need to lose 50 pounds. I'm going to call Weight Watchers and I'm going to ask them, how can I lose 50 pounds by next week? It's just not going to happen. And what happens with that, Chris, is I had people April, May, June, July, parents reaching out and saying, my child is going to school in August. and they want to earn a debt-free degree, and we are short whatever it was, 10,000, 15,000. One of them was $37,000. What
Mm.
can you do to help? But you know what? If you don't have that mindset from the very beginning, then coming in on the back end makes it harder. Now, that doesn't mean that I couldn't help them. But one of them actually said to me, my son is on track to accrue $100,000 in debt, and he has no clue how much that is. They had a lot of conversations about who their son needed to be as a person, who their son needed to be as an academic, as a scholar, as an athlete, but not as a consumer and not as a future contributing member of society. And he didn't have any clue, and they had not had those conversations. And so I don't think that's an anomaly. I think that's happening all over. I think that's why students rightly think, I'm going to walk into my school's financial aid office and I'm going to get financial aid. I'm going to get help for my finances. But that's not what financial aid is there for. Financial aid is there so the student has access to loan funds so that they can pay the tuition that the school has set or the fees that the school has set. And so it doesn't exist to help the student graduate debt free.
Yeah, it was interesting because I'm a Gen X millennial, and my generational cohort was like, just take out student loans. The main thing was like you were talking about is like just achieve something. Like they were like, you get into Harvard, Stanford, and take out a student loan, or your parents will pay for it, or you'll get a job later on that pays for it. And people are starting to question that mentality.
I don't know if I can ask this, and if you choose not to answer, or if you think this is inappropriate, or I don't know if you have a remix, or you're like, let's just take all this section out. I'm curious though, as a physician, did you graduate debt free?
Yeah, I actually graduated because what's interesting was I took an alternative approach. So whereas my friends and colleagues were going to these extremely high ticket institutions, back then a year at like Harvard or Stanford was like 70K or something. Now it's probably 100 to two. It's something outrageous. But I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pay that money for. And then I'm like, so I was more strategic. So I was looking for scholarships. I applied for every single scholarships, and I'd try to max. I was very strategic. So what is the biggest bang for my buck? Like what institution will give me the best chance for success where
Yes.
I don't have to pay anything. And so I took that approach, and it worked out better because a lot of my colleagues that went to these very elite schools, they ended up not as good futures because they ended up in debt and was very competitive, and a lot of times they couldn't hang. And then the same thing with medical school is it's really hard to get a free ride to medical school unless you're a superstar or you're a minority but there's different pathways from which you can get your tuition funded. Me, I graduated debt free because I spent 4 years pursuing a PhD doing research for the institution. That was my path. And during those 4 years, I invested myself and got financially free, learned about the role of money. And it was the best thing I could ever have done. I hope that answers
Does
the
that mean
question.
you're both a PhD and an MD?
Yeah. Yeah. I was in yeah.
Wow. So I know your listeners might not be able to hear this, but I
Mhm.
am giving Chris a big old pom pom. I am just cheering you on because, Chris, most of the people, when they say, okay, you say you can map any degree debt free. What about a dentist? What about a doctor? And I always say military because that's another path. And so I now have this story, and I am going to be sharing this widely. Not that I wasn't already, but for years and years to come. Let me tell you how I was on a podcast with a gentleman who graduated with his PhD and his MD debt free.
Mhm.
Kudos to you, sir. Kudos to you.
But it's interesting because I'm like the 1% because a lot of like my classmates, they were like, yeah, I'm not going to waste 4 years and forego a six-figure salary. I need to graduate as soon as I can to pay off that student loan debt. And so it's basically this hustle mentality.
Free.
And so basically they would take on that student loan debt, that 4 years
Yes.
and to pay it
Yes.
off. But like I said, it's not the traditional standard way but yeah.
And that's the whole thing about debt free degree. It's not the traditional standard way. And also, when you walked across the stage, you owed zero. You owed nobody. So you can go open up your own practice. You can go do whatever you want to do. The sky was the limit because you didn't have to pay that back. And it's so short-sighted of you have brilliant colleagues, you have brilliant peers who obviously were in those top 1% to get in those programs, and yet they didn't have the financial education and the financial literacy that you have. And I would be curious how many of them lament paying that student loan payment every month. I talked with a student, it was probably about a year ago. I had just been to a networking event and just met a brand new dentist. Like, he had graduated in May and this was like June. And I said, I'm just curious if you don't mind sharing, how much student loan debt do you have? And this young man said, and he was young, he just graduated from dental school, $400,000 in debt. 2 months later, I'm at this networking thing for college students that I do. And the student said, I want to be a dentist. And I was like, you're looking at 400 grand in debt. I think you should perhaps thinking about the military. Nope, I can't. That's just too confining. And I said, how confining is it going to be to pay off $400,000? We get to pick our hard, right? It's going to be hard to do military. It's going to be hard to pay it back. Pick your hard.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack it and unravel because, like I said, I read this New York Times article where this doctor, he graduated with, he was bragging about it, that he had $800,000 in debt, and he had a wife and 2 kids on a residence salary, and he bought a house, and he was bragging about it. And to me, that is the dumbest thing you can do, because you're basically strapped for life, and if something happens or you hate your career, you can't change, you're just stuck there in just like these outrageous stories. But yeah.
And I don't know about y'all, those kinds of loans, but there are some students that are taking loans. Like, I interviewed somebody. I have a podcast or a YouTube series, and it's entitled, Dang, I Wish I Knew You When I Went to College. Because that so often is the response when somebody says, what do you do? And I tell them, I interviewed this lady. She got a degree in fine art. She was a non-trad student. She was like in her 30s when she went to this art institute and graduated with $75,000 in debt. And 23 years later, she still owes $60,000 because the interest keeps accruing and accruing and accruing. She said, I'll never pay it off. I'll never own my own home. She will be paying on that. And I don't know about her specific loans, but there are some loans that when you buy a house, when you buy a car, you've got a tangible asset that at least you can sell to recoup something. But when you have a degree, all of that is in your brain and you can't sell it. And there's some loans that when you pass away, all of that wisdom and all of that intellect and all of that amazing talent is gone. It is dead. And yet those loans pass to your heirs to pay off.
Yeah. I even know, what's interesting is that we were talking about student loans and we're talking about doctors, right? And people think like doctors are rich, but there's actually a cohort of doctors. They actually embrace the frugal lifestyle. So they're eating ramen noodles and say penny pinching and, bragging about paying off their student loans. And it's crazy because like you think like lawyers and doctors go out to eat at fancy restaurants. And so it's just really interesting.
Yes. But that is obviously our lives had not intersected at that point. And I can map your plan by the GRIT blueprint. Here's the SM. Here's what Dr. Chris did. Dr. Chris. Now that I know that you're doctor, it's really difficult not to call you Dr. Lou. But this is your SM. And then your friends, your family, your folks, they helped you somewhat. And then OPM was out there. You had a whole OPM that says, if you do the PhD, we'll help you with medical school. Beautiful.
How can people find you and reach out to you and learn more about this? Because it's really important. And even, like I said, when I graduated in 2007, and back then we had a student loan officer come, and his primary job was just to basically consolidate student loans. And now there's like all these income and loan forgiveness, all these really just, I think they just do it to confuse you. And so how can people find you and get more information and reach out to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm on Facebook, Debt Free Degree with Dr. Ross. Same thing on Instagram. And find me on YouTube. I've got my YouTube channel. It's just YouTube at Dr. Ross. And lots of videos are there. And then, of course, my website, drross.love. I also, Chris, just for your audience, I have a great download for them. So for those that are interested, I have a free chapter of the book, free chapter 1 of my Debt Free Degree book that came out in June. And then I offer 2 free webinars a month to come and get more information. And I would be delighted for your audience to join me there. And so both of those are there at drroz.love/financial freedom with Dr. Lou.
I love that. And thanks so much for really enlightening podcasts. And it's really enjoyed talking with you. And I encourage all the listeners to check out Dr. Roz's resources and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you so very much. Look forward to future episodes, and thanks for all the amazing work you are doing in the world.